All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining with this great group of people. We're going to talk about data security in security. And I think one of the coolest parts is this topic actually sparked from a GSX summary brief that we just did. And the group that's on the call now wants to talk about it, but I think we all have a different perspective. What's important in the security data, what's not important in security data, what data we should be protecting, what data we shouldn't be protecting or shouldn't care about. And we're going to kind of touch on a couple of those topics right now. And I think I'm actually going to start with Kehkashan, because Kehkashan, you have not only a wealth of knowledge in the industry from a very corporate level, Fortune 100, but also you have it in the security realm of consulting. And so you've seen a lot of clients, you've seen a lot of industries, you have that horizontal perspective. So we're going to start with you and tell us from your perspective, what is the most important data that you think exists in the security industry and why?
Yeah, I think that's like the most fundamental question is, right? Like what type of data should we be collecting? What is too much and what is too little? And ultimately, I think the most important data is what's going to help you make decisions, because data is what helps you understand, well, what exactly is the risk? And then you can help to start either mitigate it, manage it, prevent it, etc. So I think when you think about like the levels of data, it really depends on what your company or what your department is really focused on. And this could range from the people data, right? Like you could have people data from a badging perspective. Are you letting the right people into the right facilities? It is also from your leadership perspective. When you have a crisis response that occurs, like shit hits the fan and you're like, okay, I need to get in touch with individuals. You might need data for your leadership. Either you have, some companies use corporate phone numbers, others use personal cell phone numbers. And so you have to be able to consolidate a lot of that information, understand how are you going to get in touch with them very quickly, and how are you going to make sure that the right people are on the call. So that's just from a people standpoint. But I think, security, there's so many variety of things that we do. So you could have, and you were talking about this earlier, it's like your your CCTV data, your biometrics data, the two-factor authentication, like you have all this information that's coming in. But again, I think ultimately what data is important is very much going to depend on the type of security that you're doing and what your responsibilities are.
Yeah, and maybe later at a date, we actually take that as a fundamental. I would love to do it by security vertical, right? Crisis management, travel
Yep.
management, guarding. We've got pharma, fi- financial services, so on and so forth. We know that they're protecting their internal data, but how are we as security professionals protecting their security data, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Great spot. Great point. So next is what do you think we can do better, Kikishan, in 2024 to do data protection just as a whole? Is there any specific examples you have?
Yeah, and I think this is not just inherent to data security. I think this is inherent to all of security. But personally, I think that doing planning collectively with your counterparts in cybersecurity, in your data protection team, in your content moderation team. I come from a social media background, so I think about that a lot. And I think having those conversations with like your physical security like hat on to ensure that everybody sort of understands where the risk is coming from, because you may think of a risk that they might not, and vice versa. So you need to be able to prepare for different scenarios where you might have a joint task force where you're putting together these projects or programs where you're aligning your systems and your procedures together, so it's more of a seamless protecting process instead of you doing things in a silo. So I think that is like the biggest thing that you could do to do, data protection better in 2024. And I think the second part, and again, I think you can probably attest to this as well, is data hygiene from an employee perspective. The company has responsibility on how they protect data, but the employee also has to take some responsibility, but the responsibility on what they should be protecting and how they should be protecting is for the company to teach, because the world is changing and it's
Right.
changing very fast.
And
And
got,
yeah,
go
we
ahead.
have to be the subject matter experts for them to give them an understanding of where to start.
And data hygiene, I think, is a very important topic. You could go down that with the guideline route of what we do and don't have right now as far as data protection guidelines and actually the hygiene, right? Are we keeping more data than we need? And is that a risk to us to actually keep more data than we need, right? So
Agreed.
great point. All right, Mr. Nick, you're up. I'm going to ask you, so Nick, do you think we are protecting the data that we have today well enough? And if no, if yes or no, what do you think?
I don't think we're protecting our security data as well as we should be. I think we're pretty good as security practitioners at protecting our company's critical data. But when it comes to our security systems and the information we're protecting, and the one I see the most that it makes me want to cry and cringe is when I see a vulnerability assessment that lays out the roadmap to attack the security systems, whether they're physical or cyber, and it's not protected to the level of the information that it's protecting. To me, that's just the massive backdoor that we leave open. And it's just a matter of we're so focused on protecting the company we work for, we don't think to protect ourselves,
Correct.
including our personnel or personal data.
Yep.
I know the last company I was at, I got a lot of raised eyebrows when I carried 2 phones because everything we did at work was subject to a public records request, and I didn't want my personal information on there. So a lot of people thought I was crazy conspiracy theorist, but it's like, you know what? I'm
No.
hard firewall between those two. But that's one of the things I see a lot is that we are so good about protecting company data, not as much the security that protects it.
And what do you think is the most important data in the security industry, the most important metrics?
I
Or
think
even
ultimately when it comes down to that most critical and most important data, it's the pieces that make our security systems run. It's our security architecture, any of the cybersecurity pieces we have on there, down to where do we have our control boards, where are they physically located, where are our servers located. We tend to be a little bit more fast and loose with that than we are necessarily with some of the critical pieces, but that's the opportunity for an adversary to get in there and take that trusted system and corrupt it.
Yeah. Mr. Mark, we're going to do number 2 with you. And we are going to say, Mr. Mark, so what do you, are we doing a good enough job today protecting our data? And if so, or if not, how?
Well, from a personal perspective, we have Experian. You can do your credit freeze. And oftentimes if I'm going to do a loan or have an inquiry done on my credit, I'll take the freeze off or unlock my credit through Experian. And so I'll do that from a personal perspective. And there's many ways you can freeze that information so no one has access to it. Because I actually had my identity stolen in LA, and I had my stuff stolen out of my car because I actually left some stuff. I was moving from Orange County back to Oregon and had all my stuff stolen, my social security, date of birth. So I had to lock everything up for like a year. And because I used Experian, the credit freeze, nobody could hack me. Even if they had my social security, date of birth, they couldn't hack me because I did that credit freeze. But from a corporate standpoint, I would say from all the, the consumer side, from you have to do biometrics on your face. Like the iPhone has a great feature where you don't have to type in a password. You just tap it twice and looks at your face, biometric, and boom, it's right there. No fingerprint needed. So I think the technology and science behind research and development are doing an amazing job. I know Chase does an amazing job. If they sense that you're doing something fraudulent, if I'm on a travel trip to Texas, for example, I had like 3 freezes on my credit because, are you in Dallas, Texas right now? Just put yes to confirm or 1 on your text. I did it, and boom. And so I think the financial industry institutions are on top of it. I think Apple's on top of it. And I think too, from a consumer side, it's definitely more so than it has been 10 years ago. But from a corporate standpoint, our adversaries are looking to ways to shut us down. Hence, the big cyber attack that happened. I think MGM Casinos got hit a few weeks ago while we're at GSX. And that was from probably who knows what country did it. But, that's the best way to do an attack on America is basically a cyber. Shut down that institution or that industry and that, shut down their electricity and you can't do anything. So our adversaries know that. So that's kind of my thoughts on
Mr. Tim.
Risk management perspective. So I think companies and people within the security industry, we need to take a step back, go back to square one and say, what do we have? How did we get it? Why do we have it? What can we use it for? And what should we be using it for? And until you actually understand these questions, you can't really have a data protection strategy. You can't have a compliance strategy. You can't track where the data is coming from and how you're using it. Is it ethical? Is it aligned with GDPR or whatever your regulations are? Whether it's, information that your GSOC is collecting. And a lot of GSOCs, they're actually collecting a lot of non-security data, right?
Yes.
Are you sure that you're aligned with the source of that data, which is usually another company or a client company? So I think it's not the easiest way, but it's the best way. Answer those questions and make sure that you have a good understanding of what you have, where it came from, why you have it, and why you're keeping it. And then look at the things that don't matter and like, why are you keeping that data? If it's not usable, if it's not beneficial, if it doesn't fall neatly within a compliance framework, why are you keeping it? We tend to like to hoard things just in case. Probably not a good strategy these days. Data is an asset. Whether it adds to your balance sheet or not, it is an asset. It's important to somebody, which means you have to deal with it thoughtfully. You have to have a risk management strategy around it. The other thing is we need to normalize transparency in all of our risk management endeavors, right? So we should bring third parties in to look at our data protection plans, the types of data we have, what we're using it for, all of these things. We should make sure that we audit and that we can withstand scrutiny, that we're open to questions. This is just a good business process. And I think security, we need to begin looking at ourselves, not as an expense center or a cost center, but as a business unit. And if we start conducting ourselves in that way, I think the business world is going to take us a lot more seriously.
Agreed. Well stated. All right, Mr. Nick, we're going to go to you. So, Nick, what do you think is the most important data in the security industry?
So I think the most important data in the security industry, beyond the security systems, the next piece I want to get into with the vertical I work in energy, is that data that controls a physical device, the Internet of Things, if you will, the industrial control systems. We do a lot of space with that, particularly in the energy side, where you have data that you're using to physically go out, like where I was at earlier this week, to open a 100-year-old valve that could open or shut water to a large municipal area downstream. So that data around that, kind of getting back to Mark's point of being able to shut down the pieces we rely on, that infrastructure, that's usually the next piece where I get real nervous if I see that data a little bit too public.
Perfect. And how do you think we can better protect it, going forward?
The first part, the biggest part, is the classification. You got to know what it is. What is that data? Where is it? Where does it live? What's critical versus what's not? Because back to Tim's point, there's a transparency piece there as well, particularly when you're looking at getting into the public confidence. They want to understand. So how do you show them enough without showing potentially an adversary too much? And that comes back to, you have to talk to the end users and understand what you can do with that data.
Well said. And I'll pipe in there too. And Nick, I think one key topic, and we're going to hit on it eventually, is third-party management. So vendor data we put into vendors that we work with that is sensitive. And do we have the proper third-party oversight to manage that data and collect that data back and terminate after we terminate a relationship, where does that data go, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely a piece that we're dealing with on the electric side. They're starting to take that a lot more seriously in the kind of the bulk transmission in North America, at least, around how do you manage your vendors. And that's really hard right now. The approach is to try to regulate, but it's hard to regulate something that's outside of the jurisdiction. So it's regulatory, but it's really best. hoping more than regulating.
Yep. All right, Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I'm very nuanced when it comes to this specific topic, but there's been obviously over the last couple of years, artificial intelligence has become like another bane of our existence to some degree, but also a boon for our existence. And I feel like I think back to what Nick was saying about the data that we're not securing in the security space specifically, and what concerns me is how biometrics will continuously become more and more prevalent in the different tools that we're using, and what challenges are we seeing over the next 5 to 10 years, and how are we going to be able to kind of mitigate those issues, because it's going to become prevalent, whether it's facial recognition or gait recognition, iris recognition. I mean, so many different things that's personal information that people are just basically throwing out there into our systems.
Yo-Yo, why don't you go ahead? How can we do data better?
Because
Go
I think probably the more we automate the processing of data, the safer it will be. I think a lot of the statistics right now show that data becomes vulnerable once humans get hold of it, because if they're not sending it sending the right data to the wrong person, or sending the wrong data to the right person, a lot of the issues, and I've got so much data to support this, the Ponemon Institute report, there was a Accenture report, McKinsey report, all showing that round about 69 to 70%, most of the data breaches are involving humans. So in fact, this leads quite nicely on to me answering question number 3. And this is really about the role of a CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer. Cybersecurity is about the protection of an organization's data. And I think a lot of people are quite scared if they're not in a cybersecurity role. I think they're quite scared of that term and think that everybody that works in cybersecurity needs to be around about 21 to 26-year-old male and wearing a hoodie and working in the dark all the time. And it really isn't like that. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of very professional people working in cybersecurity roles. And I think we need to consider that the data in organizations that so robustly needs protecting is data that's around intellectual property, it's data around HR and people-oriented data, employee data. It's also around wages and business transactions. It's huge. And I think that the biggest mistake everybody is making right now is they're not looking at all humans as possible firewalls. Whether you're a security officer in a reception of a building, or whether you're the CEO who is more likely to be vulnerable to a social engineering exercise, if we consider all employees within an organization have the potential to be incredibly strong firewalls. And this goes back to the question, CISOs tend to be, and they certainly are in the UK, technologists. They come from an engineering background, a networking background, or an architecture background. And yet they have a very strong discipline in technology. But in cybersecurity and data protection, there are 3 pillars. You've got people, process, and technology. So it's my belief that CISOs should be a mixture of both physical and cybersecurity disciplines. They don't need to be technologists. They just need to put people first. And Rachel Briggs, who belongs to the Clarity Factory, she produced a report for ASIS once, and she produced a report afterwards to talk about the role of a CISO. And her evidence demonstrated that the CISOs of the future need to focus on people and not technology.
The next one is, how can we do a better job in 2024 with data protection?
Okay, so most leadership security professionals will have to partake in audits. And I think this is a classic example. If you look at PCI DSS, it's a standard regulatory audit for any business processing payment card industry data. That's what PCI stands for. In 2018, they produced a report, and only 47% of those businesses requiring compliance were meeting the standard. That was 2018. And those are companies that are holding and protecting our credit card information. So if that's what's happening, you can understand now why we're seeing so many security breaches. And hackers now, they don't need to go for the big target. If you're a hacker, you know that banks are highly regulated, highly protected. That's why they've gone for casinos. And more to the point, they want to brag about who's hitting those targets. It's not like the old-fashioned bank robber where you hide away from the or these people are coming up going, yeah, we did it, and we did it, and it was really easy. So when you look at all of the audits that organizations have to do, what I'm tending to find is that organizations are just going for the minimum standard. What do I need to pass this audit? And I think the way we can do this better as responsible people in a leadership role is to ensure that we are always putting together best evidence, and we're always seeking for ways to be stronger and better in our cybersecurity resiliency instead of just meeting that minimum standard.
Spot on.
Yo-yo, you can really just summarize what you said in risk management and program management.
Yep.
Why this works, Tim.
Well done. Well done. All right, Mr. Olivar, we are going on to you. Mr. Olivar, are we protecting the data we have well enough today? If yes or no, why not? Or why?
The answer will be maybe. And why is because it depends where we are. What is the knowledge that we have in terms of, for example, the regulations that we need to deal with. Sometimes we could say, oh no, we are in North America. We are in compliance with whatever we're working with. Really? Are you managing, for example, Europe data from European people? Yes. So it's not just North American regulations. You need to comply with the European one. Otherwise, your company, doesn't matter if it's a 500 Fortune company, is in trouble. And sometimes we don't have that visibility. We don't have the inventory of data that we are storing. So we need to be sure that we have that inventory. We need to be sure that we understand what we are storing. And remember, always, that's my daughter around. and data is toxic. So if we have enough data that we don't need, we are in trouble. So we need to be sure that we're managing the proper way.
Well done.
Alvar, can I come in? It's more than that
Sure.
now. As soon as GDPR, the General Data Protection Act, became law in the UK in 2018, May it was, all of a sudden, we all realize as security professionals, we see risk, we see gap analysis, we see all that. We realize the longer you hold on to someone's data, the more risk is on you as a business, as an organization, as a person, as a manager. And so really the key thing is to get rid of everything you don't need, because the longer you hold on to it, the more liable you are.
Absolutely. Get rid of everything
That's
you need.
a perfect.
Go ahead.
Sorry, no, that you mentioned, John, that's absolutely critical. I didn't mention before because we already talked about data aging. So we need to understand, what do we need? I already talked about that. How long are we storing that data? And of course, are we protecting that data in the same way that we're protecting, for example, the crown jewels? And if the answer is we don't know, we are in trouble. If the answer is no, we are in trouble. So we need to work on that.
And I think, the process around data, what we're collecting and why, and the cleanup exercise that we all know we need to do, right? And it's funny, I even thought about doing this personally myself. Have you ever gone through all your pictures and deleted out all the pictures that you either have duplicates of or you don't need, right? Just cleaning out that inbox. How many times did we as, professionals or even personal people do that? So, great job, guys.